Alright y'all, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It is that time of year again, mid-February. We're all thinking about getting out there fishing, so I'm going to be talking today about the 5 baits I think you should be throwing in 2023 to catch big smallmouth. But this list isn't coming from just anywhere. These are the lures that I used last year to catch my biggest smallies, and a few of them may have been on the video that I made last year about the same topic. So if you're curious, go ahead and check that out. Those were 5 baits that I think you should have been throwing in 2022 to catch big smallies, but we're going to update that list as always based on this past season. And we're going to move forward, so let's get into it. So the first lure that's going to make the list is going to be a Whopper Plopper. Now I specifically throw this bait in the 75 size. There are other sizes. If you want to go bigger, go for it. If you want to go even smaller, go for it. I think it's a big fish bait no matter what. I've lost track of the number of 20-inch plus smallmouth that I've caught on a plopper. This season alone, it put my personal best muskie in the boat. It put my personal best smallmouth in the boat at 21.5 inches. It's just a big fish bait. I don't know what else to say about it. Now, I usually throw a light or dark color. I don't get too fancy with it. And there are days where I literally cannot put this bait down because it is so effective. I might want to throw something else just because I want to mix it up, but I literally come back to the plopper because it just pulls fish in and generates so many bites. I did make a whole video on mistakes I think people are making, so go ahead and check that video out here. Give it a full watch, and hopefully you can use a Whopper Plopper to put your PB in the boat this coming season. So the second bait that's going to make the list this year is one that did make the list last year. It is the Megabass Dark Sleeper. If you're a smallmouth fisherman and you're not familiar with the Dark Sleeper, you really should be. It is a jig swim bait hybrid. It's got a flat bottom and the weight is actually inside the swim bait. It's also got a flat bottom. It makes it a great bait for fishing along the bottom and maintaining that bottom contact. I really like to slow roll it on hard bottom. It does say that it has a weedless hook, but it's only protected by 2 little fins, and I don't see it as weedless. It will catch grass, but I usually only fish it on rocky bottom. I'm usually slow rolling it, and I especially like it in areas where there is scattered rock of different size, where it is going to hang up on some bigger rock, and when you pop that thing over the rock, that's going to generate some reaction strikes from smallmouth. In addition to the Dark Sleeper, Megabass also came out with a sleeper gill, which is a swim bait. It's a little bit less of a jig, but it does have a taller profile because it resembles a bluegill. For us smallmouth anglers up north that have access to waters that have perch living in them, I think this is a good solution for mimicking those perch because it does have that taller profile. It also comes in a perch color that I have used this past season with some success. Now, I don't like this bait as much for trying to maintain bottom contact because I just don't feel like the weight of it keeps it down very well. I don't like the shape of the weight as much as I do in the sleeper, but it is a little bigger profile and it is going to be a little bit different to those big smallmouth that are probably eating perch. So if you're around those kind of fish, this is definitely a bait you should be throwing in 2023 to put some big ones in the boat. Alright, so the third bait that's going to be on our list for this coming year is going to be a jerk bait, but I have really fallen in love with the Megabass Vision 110 Junior jerk baits and also the X80 Trick Darter. So I'm going to talk about both for use in different scenarios. Let's start with the bad. These jerk baits are expensive, and I had a bad experience with Vision 110s early on, using them in cold water, banged one off of a rock, and its bill broke immediately. So I was kind of anti-Vision 110 there for a while, but I did buy some. I used them a lot this year. I had some really good days on the water with them. So let's go ahead and talk about how I fish them, where I like to use them, and all of the benefits that I think they bring to the table. So I'm sure you've heard of the Vision 110 in its normal size. It's a great jerkbait. I'm not downgrading it at all for you guys. Throw it whenever you want, but some of the rivers that I fish in call for a little bit smaller presentation. And that's because the bait just doesn't get that big. And also sometimes these rivers are just shallow, especially during low water periods like the summer or late fall. Some of those full-size jerkbaits are just gonna get down too deep, and I don't want them to. I wanna present that bait in the strike zone, and I feel like the Junior does a great job of doing that in smaller rivers. I think it does this because it's very good at suspending, so the 110 Junior isn't really going to be diving too deep on you. It's kind of in that 2 to 4 foot range. So there are a couple situations that I really think the 110 Junior shines in, and that is casting way behind cover downstream of it when fish are positioned way off of it. Again, especially in those smaller, shallower rivers. In an open water scenario, it has great action and it suspends perfectly, so it just slowly floats downstream right in that strike zone, and that has really drawn a lot of bites for me this past season. Another application that I really like to use it in is casting upstream of laydowns for fish that are hiding in the laydown or maybe a little bit downstream, working it on top of it and letting it float underneath a little bit, but also jerking it out and really drawing those fish from wherever they are deep inside the laydown out to bite it. And if they don't bite it, I at least see where they are, see where they're positioned, and I'm able to toss another bait in there to hopefully get a secondary follow-up bite. And lastly, the strongest application for this bait for me is when there is a substrate change in the middle of a river channel. So this is going to be out in open water. There's no laydowns. The cover is actually on the bottom. So let's say we go from sand to rock and I know where that transition is. I'm going to throw that Vision 110 out in a couple different ways. Now I've had really good success sitting upstream of that, throwing downstream and bringing it back against the current. And I have also had good success circling around and throwing upstream, bringing it down over those transitions. Now I did mention another jerkbait that I really liked and fell in love with this year, and that is the Megabass X80 Trick Darter. This is going to be a bait that I use in rivers that are a little bit deeper. Now it's about the same size as a Vision 110 Junior, but it does have a little bigger hooks, and as I said, it dives deeper, so that allows me to access fish in those deeper holes or just in general in a deeper river altogether. This bait to me really shines because it gets down to depth so quickly and it stays there. It's a great suspending jerkbait. It has a really erratic action, but you can control that again with your rod. And so if you want it to be a little lighter and more subtle, you can definitely make that happen. But if you want to draw attention from fish that may be kind of far away, this is a really good bait to do it with. And given that I am a almost exclusively river fisherman, I really like it because it performs well in current. It's not just gonna float down with the current. You're still gonna get that good action when you're bringing it with the current or even against it. It's a great river jerkbait. All right, let's keep the list moving. This is not going to be the sexiest choice or the most exciting choice by any means, but the next bait I think you should be throwing this coming season is just a realistic craw on a stand-up jig. So in my opinion, a crayfish is just something that a smallmouth bass, or a largemouth bass for that matter, is gonna be willing to eat 365 days out of the year if it's presented right. Crayfish are a forage that's available in just about any body of water across the country, and bass know it. Bass love to eat them, so I really think we need to be just going back to the basics here and have something tied on all the time that smallmouth are almost guaranteed to eat. Now there are 1,000 crayfish baits out there, but again, I'm recommending that you go with something that is very realistic, something like a Nico craw, something like a Yum craw bug, something like a Savage Gear craw. They're realistic, kind of 3D modeled craw, but in either case, all of these baits are going to do well at attracting attention because they look so real. Obviously, how you fish a craw can vary throughout the year, but especially during the cold months when the bite is tough, dead sticking a craw is going to be something that you should be doing. Letting it sit right in front of a smallmouth's face without actually doing much, or just giving it a tug every now and again, is going to be a good way to get bites on those tough days. Whether it's February or whether it's August, I recommend you try throwing a craw on some sort of stand-up jig. One that I really like is made by Eagle Claw, and I don't hear a lot about it. It is a scorpion football shaped shaky head jig. It has a nice little angle. It's probably up about 40-45 degrees. It's not standing straight up, but it does look like a crayfish is posturing to defend itself, which again, I think any smallmouth who has cornered one knows that means they have it where they want it. I think that's going to generate strike. Another jig head setup is just going to be the classic spot remover. I would say this one is a little more vertical, so you can experiment with the verticality of the jig and see what they want on different days, but this is a great go-to for many times of the year when you're just wanting to generate bites. And one last thing I think you should do with the craw this year is throw it into those areas where you thought you got bit or you did get bit on another bait. Let it soak. Sometimes the fish, maybe they missed the topwater bait, but you throw in there with the craw, that's going to be something they're more willing to eat, especially if it's just sitting there staring at them and you know the fish is there. The fifth bait I think you should be throwing more of in 2023 isn't as much of a bait as it is a rig, and that is the Tokyo rig. So full disclosure, this bait didn't catch any of my biggest smallmouth in 2022. It did catch some big ones. It did catch my biggest largemouth of the season, but it's a bait I think needs to be on this list anyway. So let's get into why. So firstly, let's just define what a Tokyo rig is. It's essentially a 3-part rig. You have a line tie, you have a hook, and then you have a shaft for a weight. This rig is super versatile for that reason. It can replace a Texas rig, it can replace a punching rig, and I'm gonna recommend that you actually throw it as a rig with a swim bait on it to slow roll roll on the bottom. Because of the way this rig is put together, you have your swim bait up here and your weight down here. So as you move it through the water column, it is really moving like this, and the weight and the swim bait are separated. They're disconnected. So when you get a bite and you set the hook, you're driving the hook straight in and you don't have to work through any weight. That is one benefit of this rig. Another benefit is that it keeps the swim bait up off the bottom. So if the smallmouth just aren't in a mood to come and attack something directly on the bottom and slam into the rocks, this is a good rig. So let's say a smallmouth is following it, right? We have the weight on the bottom making contact here, making all sorts of noise, but the swim bait is acting up here. It's a little easier for them to come up and grab it from behind, and for you as well to set that hook. Now with that said, you do have to be careful about going too fast, otherwise the weight and the swim bait itself are going to be too close together and the swim bait's not actually going to be that far off the bottom. I even like to make my own custom Tokyo rigs that have a longer shaft so I can ensure that my swim bait is up just a little bit more off the bottom. With the Tokyo rig specifically in the pre-spawn, I really like to throw it down current seams. I have had a lot of success throwing a swim jig parallel to current seams or right down in them, and that's mid column. But let's say that the fish are a little more focused on the bottom. Slow rolling that Tokyo rig down the current seam where it's not as affected by the current because of that weight holding it to the bottom. I think this makes a really tasty presentation for smallmouth who are just chilling behind a rock or something. I had some good success last year doing this. I didn't do it as much as I wanted to. That's one reason I put it on the list for 2023, and I think you should too. What would a bait video be without a bonus sixth bait? I do want to throw one in there that I did catch some big smallies on, so I'm going to end with the KVD flat-sided crankbait 1.5. This is a great mid-depth crankbait. I love it in that 6 to 9 foot range. It does a good job deflecting off cover, and because it's a flat side, it has a little bit tighter wobble. I don't know why the fish may like that in certain times of the year, but I do think that's true. In the late fall in colder water, 40 something degrees, I was cranking smallmouth up with this at full speed. So I don't know why it works exactly, but I think it's a bait you should consider using. I've used it on Lake Michigan, I've used it in river situations, and in both instances it did catch me quality smallmouth, so I'm gonna be throwing it more this coming season. That's all I got for you guys. Those are the baits that I'm really gonna be focusing on in 2023. I'm gonna, of course, experiment with other things. There'll be videos on specific baits and techniques, as always. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, hit subscribe. If you don't, either way, I'm going fishing. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.